What if I told you that the most powerful love stories don't begin with ruses or romantic dinners, but in pain, darkness, and complete rejection? This isn't a fairy tale. It's not fiction. This is the kind of story that challenges everything you think you know about love, worth, and second chances. He was a millionaire, young, powerful, and admired. She was a homeless drug addict, abandoned, abused, and invisible to the world. They came from completely different realities. One was driven around in a black Mercedes. The other was sleeping under bridges, fighting to survive one more night. But fate, or something greater, brought them together in the most unexpected way. And what happened next might just shift something deep inside you. Because maybe you're not watching this by accident. Maybe this story isn't just about them. Maybe it's a reminder that love still exists, and that even the most broken lives can become living proof that God still writes miracles through people no one expects. This is their story, but don't be surprised if you see a little bit of yourself in it too. His name was Josh. At just 32, he was a self-made millionaire with more success than most people dream of. He had it all: a mansion in Beverly Hills, luxury cars, international business deals, a name that opened any door. People envied him, admired him, even feared him. But what no one knew was the truth he carried silently. He felt completely hollow inside. He was surrounded by everything, and yet felt nothing. The deeper he climbed in the world's eyes, the more alone he became in his own, and no amount of applause could silence the ache in his chest. Josh had lost his mother 2 years earlier, his only anchor to anything pure. Her death wasn't just painful, it unrooted him completely. His father, always distant, had buried himself in business deals. Friends disappeared when the party stopped. The laughter faded when the cameras were off. He started to notice that people only loved him when he was useful. And when you're rich, you're often just a credit card with a smile. He filled the silence with distractions: late-night parties in Malibu, flights to Paris for dinner, even meaningless relationships. But each night, he would return to a cold, oversized bed and stare at the ceiling, wondering what the hell he was doing with his life. He was tired, not physically, spiritually. There was no joy in buying another car, no peace in chasing another zero in his bank account. He had mastered success, but lost his connection to something deeper: purpose. And that kind of loss doesn't show up in magazine covers. It eats you from the inside. He started skipping meetings. He stopped answering calls. His assistant got worried. But Josh didn't care anymore. He was done pretending that the illusion of wealth was enough. One afternoon, without telling anyone, he put on a hoodie, grabbed a backpack, and walked out of his penthouse. No drivers, no bodyguards, no entourage. Just him and the streets of downtown Los Angeles. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew it wasn't in the boardroom. Sometimes your soul knows where to go even when your mind doesn't. He wandered for hours, taking it all in. The cracks in the sidewalks, the stench of alleyways, the sound of sirens. People lying on cardboard, wrapped in whatever they could find. It was a different world, one he'd ignored his entire life. But now, it spoke to him louder than any TED Talk or bank notification ever had. It was raw, it was real, and strangely, it felt like home. The contrast hit him hard. His $1,200 sneakers stepping past a man without shoes. His Rolex ticking while a woman asked for time. Not the hour, but just a moment of attention. he saw a boy eating from a trash can, a pregnant teen with a black eye, an old woman talking to herself. And for the first time in years, Josh didn't look away. Because when the pain around you finally matches the pain inside you, you stop running. And that's exactly what he did. Then he saw her, curled up near a dumpster, eyes vacant, arms scarred, holding on to a plastic bag like it was all she had left. She wasn't begging, she wasn't moving, she was just there. Something about her stopped him, not out of pity, but recognition. There was a brokenness in her that mirrored his own. And though he didn't know her name, he knew, deep down, that this was where his story was about to begin. Not in a boardroom, but in a back alley where God whispers through silence. Her name was Emily, but no one had called her that in years. On the streets, names didn't matter. People didn't ask. People didn't care. She was just another body hunched on a sidewalk, wrapped in layers of filth and memory. A statistic, a shadow, a ghost with skin. At 28, she looked closer to 45, skin worn from sun, eyes hollow from trauma, lips cracked by the wind and the weight of silence. Emily wasn't living, she was surviving. Her story wasn't unique, and that's what made it even more tragic. Abuse started young, first from a stepfather, then from the streets. She ran away at 14, thinking the world outside was safer than the one inside her home. But out here, safety was an illusion. She learned quickly that rejection had many faces: cops, strangers, sometimes even shelters. And when pain became too much, the drugs offered silence. Crack, meth, pills when she could find them. She didn't want to get high. She wanted to forget, to erase the memories that kept her awake at night. But with each hit, she lost a piece of herself. She became what people feared, what people judged, what even she began to hate. A junkie, a waste, a nobody. She didn't remember the last time she looked in a mirror. Didn't remember the last hug, the last birthday, the last night she slept indoors. Showers were rare, safety rarer. She wrapped herself in torn blankets, used her backpack as a pillow, and stayed close to lights. Predators avoided the lit areas. Still, every night was a gamble. And every morning she woke up shocked that she'd made it through. People passed her every day. Some threw coins without looking. Others looked with disgust. Some shouted, "Get a job," as if a resume could erase the scar on her body and the addiction eating her soul. She had accepted invisibility, accepted that no one would see her as human again. Until that one man knelt down and left a bag of food without saying a single word. At first, she thought he was just another do-gooder wanting to feel better about himself. Or worse, someone filming for social media clout. But he didn't hold up a phone. He didn't ask her name. He simply left the bag and walked away. The next day, he came back. Again and again. And each time he left something. Food, a note, a gesture of dignity. She started to notice his eyes. Not the color. The way they looked at her. Not with fear. Not with pity. But with something she hadn't seen in years. Recognition. Like he knew what it was like to feel empty. Like he saw through the dirt and addiction and into the soul she had buried long ago. The next day, Josh came back. Emily was sitting in the same spot, arms crossed, eyes guarded. He knelt again, this time with a bag of food and a bottle of water. She didn't say a word. He placed it beside her gently, stood up, and walked away. No eye contact, no pressure, just presence. On the third day, he left a note. scrawled in pen, messy handwriting. It read, "You are not invisible. I see you, and I care." She stared at it for minutes, not because she believed it, but because part of her wanted to. That note stayed folded in her pocket for days. Each time he returned, he brought something different. A book, a sandwich, a second note. But what mattered most wasn't what he brought. It was that he kept coming back. Consistency, compassion, presence. Things she hadn't known in years. And that consistency began to chip away at her suspicion. She began to wonder what he wanted. No one shows up that often for free. Was he trying to convert her? Save her? Was this some social experiment? But Josh never asked for anything. He just sat across from her, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a soft smile. Eventually, she spoke. One word, maybe two, mostly curses at first, but he didn't flinch. He nodded, listened, responded when appropriate, like he was there to hear her, not to fix her. That confused her more than anything. She asked his name. He said, "Josh." He asked hers. She hesitated, then whispered, "Emily." For some reason, saying it out loud made her tear up. It had been so long since someone cared enough to ask and mean it. That name had felt like a stranger. Now it was slowly returning to her. Over the next few weeks, they talked, not about big things, just the weather, music. Then slowly, the harder stuff came. Abuse, loneliness, addiction, rejection, pain. Josh didn't offer solutions. He offered space. And that was the first time Emily began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was still worth loving. They never called it friendship. It didn't need a label. What they had was quieter than that, but stronger too. A kind of invisible thread that connected two broken people in a loud, noisy world. Josh kept showing up, and Emily stopped questioning why. They began sharing small moments. A laugh, a memory, a story. It was the first time in years that Emily felt like more than just a statistic. One afternoon, sitting on a bench near the shelter, Emily opened up. "I ran away when I was 14, she said. Thought the streets were safer than home." Josh didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence wasn't empty. It was sacred space. And in that space, Emily poured out her soul. She spoke about her stepfather, the abuse, the nights she'd slept in fear. She talked about the first time she used, not to get high, but to escape the noise in her head. She talked about waking up in strange places, about being touched without permission, about shame. And Josh, instead of reacting with horror or pity, simply said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you, but that's not who you are." And those words, they held more power than any sermon ever could. He told her about his own emptiness. The loneliness behind the spotlight, the luxury without meaning, the fake friends. He told her how he'd stared at his ceiling night after night, asking God if any of it mattered. It was strange how their pains were different, but the ache was the same. Two people from opposite worlds, both feeling like they'd been forgotten. And maybe that's why they understood each other so deeply. Josh brought her a small journal one day. "Write anything," he said, "even if it doesn't make sense." She laughed. "I haven't written since I was a kid." But that night, under the dim streetlight, she scribbled a single sentence. "I want to feel clean again." It was the beginning of something new. Emily started drawing again, too. Quick sketches on napkins, the back of flyers, whatever she could find. She drew what she remembered, what she feared, what she hoped. Josh saw the pages and was blown away. "Your pain has a voice," he said, and it's beautiful. That was the first time she cried in front of him. But they were not in a fairy tale. This bond, as powerful as it was, would be tested, because healing doesn't move in a straight line, and the past always fights back when it feels you slipping away. Josh didn't know it yet, but their next chapter would be their hardest and the most dangerous. 2:22. Josh knew something was wrong the moment she didn't show up. No text, no message, no sign of her in the usual spots. He waited by the bench where they always met, but hours passed with nothing but wind and silence. A feeling of dread sat heavy in his chest. He'd seen that look in her eyes before, the flicker of fear, the urge to disappear. Addiction doesn't leave quietly. It waits for you to get comfortable, then it attacks. He searched through downtown for hours. Shelters, hospitals, alleys. No one had seen her. His feet ached, but his heart ached more. Every terrible scenario played out in his head. He thought of the women who never came back, who got lost in the system, who became another cold body no one claimed. On the third day, he found her, curled up behind a dumpster in a narrow alley near Skid Row, her body shaking, lips blue, eyes barely open. A needle beside her, a broken whisper of who she had fought so hard to become. Josh dropped to his knees, tears falling before he could stop them. "Emily, no, please." He cradled her head as he dialed 911. His voice shook. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. "She's overdosing. Please, hurry." She barely moved, barely breathed. Josh kept whispering, "Stay with me, please. Just hold on." That moment shattered him. In the ambulance, he held her hand like it was the only thing tethering her to life. His designer clothes were soaked, torn, filthy, and he didn't care. For the first time, he didn't feel like a millionaire. He felt like a man desperate to not lose the one person who taught him what love really looked like. When they reached the hospital, he refused to leave the ER waiting room. He paced, he prayed, he begged. Hours later, a doctor emerged and said, "She's stable. You found her just in time." Josh collapsed into a chair, hands covering his face. He cried hard, not just from relief, but from the crushing reality that this journey was far from over. Recovery isn't a one-time choice. It's a war you fight daily. And sometimes, the person you love most will drag you into the trenches with them. But if you really love them, you stay. When Emily opened her eyes, she saw him sleeping in the chair beside her, his hand still wrapped around hers. She whispered, "Why are you still here?" He blinked, wiped his eyes, and answered softly, "Because you matter, even when you forget it." And from that moment forward, he knew he wasn't just part of her healing, he was in the battle with her. Rehab wasn't a miracle. It was a battlefield. Emily screamed, cried, shook, and begged to leave. There were nights she hated everyone, especially herself. Josh visited every day, not as a savior, but as a witness. He didn't come to fix her, he came to stay. And in a world where people vanished at the first sign of struggle, that meant everything. The clinic was strict. No phones, no distractions. Emily had to face herself for the first time in years. No drugs, no street noise, just silence, and all the memories it brought. There were times she nearly gave up, times she screamed at Josh to leave, but he never did. He brought books, journals, music, left letters at the front desk when she didn't want to see him. In them, he wrote things like, "You are not broken. You are rebuilding, and even on your worst days, I still see the light in you." Those words were oxygen. She started painting again, dark colors at first, then splashes of warmth. The staff noticed her shift, less anger, more reflection. She asked about group therapy, She cried when others told their stories. She even told her own, voice shaking, hands trembling. But she told it. That's how you start to reclaim your power. Josh, too, was changing. He spent less time in meetings, more time reading about recovery. He started donating to clinics, hiring former addicts at his businesses. He said, "If money can't help people heal, what good is it?" He had found something richer than profit, purpose. And that purpose came with scars, but also with meaning. Recovery wasn't linear. There were setbacks. Emily had a panic attack one night and nearly ran. But she didn't. She stayed. And in the morning, when Josh showed up with tea and her favorite book, she finally whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." That moment wasn't a victory. It was a milestone, one of many on a road filled with pain, beauty, and growth. Josh looked at her with eyes full of compassion, not pride, because this wasn't about who saved whom. It was about how two broken people chose to fight together. And what came next would prove just how far they'd come. 1 year later, Emily was clean. No relapses, no hospital visits, no slipping back into silence. She had a job at a secondhand bookstore downtown, took evening classes at the community college, volunteered at the rehab clinic that once held her through hell, and every day she woke up and whispered, "I'm still here." Josh never pressured her. He didn't ask for a title, a label, or a promise. He simply showed up. They talked, laughed, walked through the park, ate greasy diner pancakes at midnight. They lived slow and honest. And when Emily looked at him, she didn't see a millionaire. She saw a man who stayed. One evening, sitting on the bookstore steps, she reached for his hand. "I want to try," she said. "Us, the real thing." Josh smiled, not as someone who had won, but as someone who was ready to begin. They started dating quietly, with no social media posts or flashy dinners, just hearts learning how to beat safely again. Love, for them, was not an escape. It was a foundation. Together, they launched a nonprofit called Ashes to Light. It offered therapy, housing, and second chances to women in recovery. Emily led workshops and art therapy. Josh managed the operations and funding. They gave people what they never had: belonging, hope, and belief. And in doing so, they healed more than just themselves. Emily became a speaker. She stood on stages and told her truth. Not polished, not perfect, but powerful. "I was a shadow once," she would say. "Now I help others find their light." Her voice, once buried beneath shame, became a beacon. And Josh, he watched with tears and awe. People often ask Josh, "How did you know she was the one?" And he'd reply, "She didn't pretend to be whole. She chose to become whole." That kind of strength, it can't be bought. He used to chase success. Now he builds legacy. And every brick of that legacy had her fingerprints. She had risen, and he had witnessed it all. But life still had one more chapter to write, one that would take them back to the place it all began, not to reopen wounds, but to show how far they had come. Because sometimes, the most powerful way to say "I love you" is to return to the darkest place and bring light. And that's exactly what Josh planned to do. It was the 5th anniversary of the day Josh found Emily in that alley. But this time, the alley looked nothing like before. He had it cleaned, painted, and lined with candles and flowers. There was even a small sign, "Where the Miracle Began." It wasn't about show. It was about meaning. Because some places deserve to be redeemed too. Emily had no idea what was happening. She thought they were dropping off donations, like they did every month. But when she saw the alley transformed, she froze. The smell was gone. The shadows were softer. She whispered, "Is this?" Josh just smiled and held her hand. He got down on one knee. No music, no crowd, no camera. Just tears in his eyes and his heart in his hands. He said, "You saved me when I didn't even know I was lost. You showed me what love is, not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that stays through the storm." Then he asked, "Will you marry me?" And the world stood still. Emily couldn't speak at first. Her hands covered her mouth, her eyes spilling over. Then, through sobs, she said, "Yes." Not just to him, but to love, to redemption. That moment didn't erase the past, but it proved that pain doesn't get the final word. They didn't throw a Hollywood wedding. They married behind the nonprofit center, with the women Emily helped seated in folding chairs. There were no celebrities, no designer gowns, just vows written from scars and grace, and the kind of joy you can't fake, real, raw, holy. Emily stood before them not as a victim, but as a warrior, a woman who chose to fight, a woman who once believed she was too far gone, and now stood in white, whole, and radiant. Josh looked at her like he always had, with compassion, with faith, with pride, because he knew love didn't rescue her. It reminded her she was never unworthy in the first place. This wasn't just a love story. It was a resurrection, a reminder that God uses the broken to build the most beautiful things, that no matter how far you've fallen, there's still time to rise. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to walk away, even when you've given up on yourself. So now I ask you, how many people have we passed by, people like Emily, without ever really seeing them? How many stories have we judged too quickly, simply because we didn't take the time to listen? Maybe, just maybe, the miracle someone's waiting for isn't in a clinic, a program, or a pulpit. Maybe it's in you, in your ability to stop, look, and care. Josh didn't plan to change a life that day, but when he chose to see beyond the addiction, to look past the dirt and pain, he didn't just change Emily's life. He discovered his own purpose. And maybe that's the greatest kind of love. The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. The kind that stays, that listens, that fights for you, even when you don't feel worth fighting for. Now it's your turn. Do you believe in second chances? Have you ever been someone's miracle or needed one yourself? Tell us your story in the comments. Your voice matters. It might be the light someone else needs today. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications so you never miss these powerful stories, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's not over. Because maybe this is just the beginning of your story.